Hi, everybody. Welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. And I want to thank everybody so much for being here tonight. And please, for anybody that's new to the show, if you would please subscribe to my channel, I'd appreciate it. And also, if you give the show a like, I'd appreciate that also. Tonight, now I did put up a warning. Some of the topics tonight may be sensitive to some viewers. I just want you to be aware of that. Tonight, my guest, and I have an awesome guest, Jeremy Legis, who is a funeral director from Ontario, Canada. And I'm really pleased to bring him on the show. This is Jeremy. I found a clip from the newspaper on Jeremy, and I said that to Jeremy. I said, "Hey, Jeremy, look what I found out on you." And then here's the article. Jeremy was written up in Canada. What was the name of that paper, Jeremy?
I believe it was the Champion.
Yeah.
Champion.
And that's so awesome. So everyone, let's welcome Jeremy to the show. Hey, Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And everybody is just waiting. This is a topic I never thought I would ever air on my show, Jeremy. And I'm really excited because there's such a mystique, and there's mysteries, and there's a taboo about funeral directors, and I've always wanted to know about one and what's behind the scenes and what do they do, and I'm really excited about having you on the show. Now, Jeremy, before we start, would you tell the viewers, you're not just a funeral director, Jeremy, you have so many qualifications. Can you tell the viewers about yourself, please?
Sure. Well, first of all, Norene, it's wonderful and a privilege to be here. And I guess the main objective of this evening is to dispel those myths and those taboos associated with funeral service and the dying and death process altogether. So I'll do my very, very best to answer all and every question that you have to the best of my ability. And if there's something that I'm not sure about or don't have the answer to, I will certainly get back to you, and we can take care of it that way.
Mm-hmm. And also,
I started volunteering at the hospital when I was 11 years old. I was going to be a Doogie Howser. I was going to be a doctor or a paramedic. In my volunteering at the hospital and through the years, internal posting came available for a paid position, which was actually an on-call weekends part-time morgue attendant. And so you could see that not many people were very interested in that posting. So I was 16, going on 17, I believe, at the time, and I accepted the posting and was hired. At that time, I was sent down to the Center of Forensic Sciences down in Toronto, which at that time was Canada's premier medical legal investigation for forensic sciences. So postmortems were taking place there, homicide, suicide. Cases were sent from all across Canada. I remember when I was there, we actually had, from one of the Northwest Territories, there was an Inuit member that had fallen in to the ice, and he was actually frozen. And they sent him, hundreds and hundreds of miles, shipped him south to the center for the postmortem. So I was sent there, and for 2 weeks I studied and learned an awful lot. And then from there on, I was the acting attendant, and I certainly did quite a bit more work over than just weekends. So.
Okay, I'm going to turn your audio up a little bit.
Is that a little bit better?
No, I'm going to turn it up on for you.
Okay.
Oh, now, Jeremy, tonight, I know we had discussed this. So you're going to talk about, let me see your little, you had an outline. We're going to talk about the history the taboos, the myths, on being a funeral director, and talk about, you're also embalming. What else?
Sure. First, I think it's really important, Noreen, to state that as far as qualifications, education, and training goes, here in Canada, and we don't all live in igloos and play hockey, just so everyone knows that. It's actually about 98 degrees here tonight. And so the training and accreditation varies from province to province. However, Ontario has the highest standards and accreditation for their mortuary sciences program. Once I graduated high school, somehow I was accepted immediately into the course. I went down to school, studied, did my internship, wrote my school exams, my Board of Funeral Services exams, and then became a licensed funeral director. So again, in the States, regulations, protocol varies state to state, county to county. So I'll do my very best to keep it very simple. So when, for instance, we're going to talk about here in Ontario, you're trained as a funeral director, a licensed funeral director, as well as an embalmer. Now, there is a distinction due to for cultural reasons and religious reasons. If someone, for instance, is Hebrew, they're not involved in the embalming process. So they are exempt from taking any of those courses.
Okay, so what I want to do, Jeremy, what I want to do is I want to follow the outline. So we go down all the steps. Hold on for a second. I want to go down all the steps, like your outline. So we're going to do, what is a funeral director? The historic and interesting facts about the conception of celebrating a death. Autopsy and the role of a coroner medical examiner. Rigor mortis. What is rigor mortis and how soon does it happen to the body after we pass? What is embalming? Burial versus cremation. Green burials and funeral and death and misconceptions, mysteries, and myths. So can we follow that outline?
Right. Who is a funeral director? A funeral director is someone that basically takes on the role of, when a family experiences a death, they call upon, and that person guides them through the myriad of amount of information and details and planning going around celebrating that person's life and acknowledging that yes, a death has occurred, whether it is simply having the person cremated with no viewing and having a brief celebration or interment service at the cemetery, to a full 2-day visitation with prayers and the rosary and flowers, open casket and funeral mass and so forth. We're prepared to do that. Now, I often compare it sometimes to the planning that goes into a wedding. We need to, for instance, we need to look after securing a venue, a church, for instance. We need to take care of all the paperwork, the legal documentation. We need to put up a notice, a death notice for the newspaper. Then, of course, there's caring for the deceased, which is completely, a whole separate aspect in itself. Because truly, you're there for the family. We're caretakers of the living and guardians, and we speak for the reverence of the dead. So that's basically what the role of a funeral director is. And as far as funeral directors and how funeral directing came about, it really goes back to the late 1800s or so, where you didn't have very much ceremony surrounding death, but of course death was taking place, and there were some practical requirements. For instance, who takes care of the body? Oftentimes, the family would call upon the town carpenter to look after preparing the coffin or building the coffin for them. Then they would turn to the livery agent, because the livery, they looked after the horses, and they would have a carriage that they would rent out to the family, and they would use that to transport, because sometimes the cemeteries, Norene, were quite a distance from town. So they would then, use the horse and carriage to transport the deceased out to the burial grounds. Then the needs and the family started to change a little bit, and embalming was introduced. Now embalming goes way back to the Egyptians, if you want to start there. I'm sure everyone's heard of the pyramids and the Egyptians. In mummification is a form of embalming. And if you think about it, those preservations have, they go back thousands of years. And some of those bodies that were prepared, it's unbelievable. Now, mummification during that time was based on status. So it was very, very important to make it to the afterlife, and that was, of utmost importance. And you basically, it was based on your social structure and regrettably, what you were able to afford as far as the celebration of your funeral service was given. The preparation itself would include, was very meticulous and laid out. The organs were removed from a very special. Now there was a group of priests that all they did was look after the embalming. The organs were removed, and they were placed in jars, which are called coptic jars, which I don't know if you have the picture there, but they were jars usually made out of clay, and the organs were placed in that jar. And then natron, which was in surplus, which is salt, was used as well as some other elements to prepare the body, and the mummification process took place. So that's basically kind of where we start with embalming. Fast forward a couple thousand years now to the Civil War. A very poignant time in history, especially for America, and the unparalleled as far as mortality and morbidity and death is concerned. And loved ones were wanting to view the bodies of their deceased, their sons, who had died at war. We're very much, and it's a primal thing. Seeing is believing. For instance, if I was to turn around and go to the store, and I said to my girlfriend, I'm just going to the store, I'll be back in 10 minutes. Well, 2 hours goes by, she gets a phone call. This is Sergeant Smith calling from the Regional Police Service. Can you come down to the station? There's been an incident, and your husband has been shot. You're in complete disbelief, and so that's why seeing it is believing, and making that connection is a very important part in the process for going forward and grieving. Back to the Civil War, bodies were prepared. Mobile sites actually were set up, and tents, if you will, very crude, very just disgusting to be honest with you. The facilities, there was no sanitization. There was hardly any sanitization for the hospitals. At some points, the hospital and the embalming suites were located in the same tent. And basically the embalming process, which was a very crude form of embalming at that time, would take place, and the bodies were shipped home back to the soldiers' families. From there, actually, at one point in time, people would know caskets. That's where caskets come around, and where they gain their foot panel aspect. They have the head panel that's up on one side, and you can see half of the body. For most of the Victorian period and such, the entire panel, which is referred to as full couch, the full lid was visible, so you could see the body from the head to toe. Unfortunately, with such horrific wounds that were being perpetrated, especially to the lower limbs and aspects of the body, and the amount of amputations that were taking place, that's where the covering of the feet, or that extra foot covering or foot panel, came into fruition.
Mm-hmm. Now, Jeremy, we had talked about earlier autopsies, and your role with the medical examiner during an autopsy. Can you tell the viewers about that? Do you remember what we talked about?
Absolutely. I apologize. There's just a little bit of feedback, Norene. Yes. Now, there's with regards to autopsies, they're also referred to as postmortems. At one time, let's say in the mid-60s, 70s, 80s, autopsies were very, very prevalent. Probably anywhere from 6 out of 7 deaths were autopsied. The reason for that was to gain knowledge of the disease process, and that's where pathology comes in. I'm sure people have heard possibly of the term or word pathologist. A pathologist is basically one who studies disease. They also study the medical and forensic aspect, or a specialty of pathology that one can study is the medical, legal, and forensic aspect of death investigation. So basically, autopsies are broken down into two main types. There is your autopsy looking for basically a pathological aspect, simply for disease. Secondly, a medical legal autopsy whenever there's been a sudden death and there's any type of cause for concern, or there's some uncertainty as to how the death occurred. What we're trying to establish in that case, Norene, is number one, cause of death. Secondly, manner of death. And they're two different things. A cause of death would be be, for instance, myocardial infarction, which is just a fancy term for a heart attack, or aspiration or hemorrhage. A manner of death would be homicide, suicide, death by misadventure, which is always rather interesting. So to combine those two together, we'll say suicide would be the manner of death, and the cause being asphyxiation, and as a result of the actual constriction of the blood vessels causing the death.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in most cases, postmortem or autopsy begins with a very thorough examination of the body from on the outside and from both sides. So from the frontal and the back side, you're looking for tattoos, scars, any marks that could be considered abnormal, any bruising. You're looking for puncture, needle marks. And you look everywhere, for instance, like in between the fingers, in between the toes, and so forth. Following which, the internal examination begins, which is typically through a Y incision, which is created with a scalpel. And you're exposing the thoracic and abdominal cavities, wherein there's a couple different methods of which the organs are removed, and each pathologist or doctor has their own preference. Then the brain also needs to be examined, and unfortunately, the only way to go about that is an incision is made in the scalp, and then the scalp is retracted in both ways, and then a saw is used. It's a tool that is used to cut through bone, but it won't cut through actual tissue, and that the skull cap then is removed, granting access to the brain. Now, someone would say, why is that important? Well, for instance, Alzheimer's disease, people, or intracranial hemorrhage, where there's been a bruising, or subdermal hematoma, where there's been a bruising in the layer of the brain that can't be spotted without going inside and actually looking. Keeping in mind at all times the respect and utmost reverence is paid to the decedent, at which, following the examination, the organs are returned, the body is sutured up, and then sent to when it's released to the funeral home.
Hey, Jeremy, can you just speak a little bit louder? That's all. The viewers are really having a hard time hearing you. You know what I thought was really interesting, Jeremy, is when we had talked earlier, you told me about the autopsies and what part you took in it, and that if you thought it was a suicide, that you would relay that to the man that does the autopsies. What do they call those?
Right.
And if it was a suicide, that they would. What would happen when you thought it was a suicide?
There was a particular instance, Norene, where when I was working out of town at a different funeral home, and the death occurred at the home. Now, the coroner released the body directly to the funeral home, and so myself and my partner, we went out to the house. There were a few things that just seemed off. Off with not only the scene, but also with interacting with the family. However, that the doctor signed the certificate and released the body, so we brought the body back to the funeral home. Through interacting again with this family over the next number of days, we had the funeral service and embalming took place. From that time and point, after following the funeral service, cremation was supposed to follow after. I contacted the coroner who signed the actual medical certificate and said that there were a few things that seemed a little bit out of sorts, and if he would be willing, or if he wanted to just take a second look. So I was quite surprised, but he took my reservation seriously and came into the funeral home. He actually signed a warrant to repossess the body, and that body was sent then for a medical legal autopsy, and the manner of death was ruled suspicious, and charges of manslaughter ended up being laid.
Now, Jeremy, I've always wondered about rigor mortis. Can you explain to the viewers what rigor mortis is and when it sets into the body after we pass?
Rigor mortis is, I guess the textbook and explanation is it's the temporary fixation of all voluntary and involuntary muscles, and basically it's in relation to a change in the pH of the body, which is the acidity and so forth. Now, rigor mortis typically will start in the scalp, go through the facial features and structures, neck, and so forth, all the way down to the toes. That begins anywhere from 6 to 8 hours following death. After which, anywhere from, I guess, 62 to 72 hours following, rigor mortis will leave, and it will leave in the same way that it came. It will leave, and from the top of the head from the bottom of the toes. It's I don't know if anyone's ever seen those pictures of a body that's in a state of full rigor mortis, that's actually suspended horizontally from two stools, and it's a perfectly straight plane, and it's amazing what the body can do in that sense. The more muscle content that the body has, the more muscle structure, the more intense the rigor mortis is going to be.
So if a body is found and the person has passed away and the body is found, if somebody's hand is up for some reason, or a leg is up, is that where it stays? Is that how it stays? Oh, Jeremy, you're listening. You're trying to hear me on the live stream. You're on a 30-minute delay by listening to me that way.
Oh no, I'm not listening. I'm not listening that way at all.
Oh, okay. Well, so like I said, when somebody dies, and if their hand or arm or leg or whatever is in the air, is when they eventually find that body will be stiff and the arm will be sitting up?
you're trying to get at, possibly, Norene, is that sometimes rigor mortis can be used in establishing the approximate time of death.
Oh.
However, it's not a real standard. Typically, the temperature of the body, the core temperature, is used more often and what is found to be quite a bit more reliable. But I think that's what you were trying to mention.
Well, yeah, because I don't understand. When you die, your body turns stiff. How long does it take for a body to turn stiff when you pass?
Well, like I mentioned, every rigor mortis is the entire process, whether it's rigor mortis, decomposition, putrefaction, and so forth, is very unique to each body. However, the standard rule would be anywhere from 6 to 8 hours following death, that rigor mortis the process would begin.
Okay. Now what about? I know you had touched about the embalming, but how far did you go into the embalming? Now the embalming, you were telling me when we had talked that it's different for each religion. Did you hear my?
Oh dear.
Did you hear my question?
I'm sorry, I didn't, Norene.
Okay. Embalming. Okay. Let me just hold on for a second, guys. Hold on for a minute. Hold on. I'll be right back.